Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. This evening I have an article, or at least I start with one, that would show how our elected officials, in this case your elected official, and I'm talking about that Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has no self-awareness, and he learned a few words and a few sentences that he should use, and he uses them all the time to sound smart, but for a certain kind of segment from our societies he sounds smart and unfortunate. But let's see what this guy is saying. This article comes from, where are you? Reuters. And you know Reuters are my friends, right? And this is what he says. Canada says war, climate concerns show need for supply chain shift. Well, whenever they have Trudeau saying something, that's Canada, okay? Just to make sure. So, the Russian invasion of Ukraine shows that authoritarian regimes are not reliable trade partners. Well, if we look at Putin and Russia as this guy put it here, as authoritarian, I think that's a lie. Because Putin is as democratically elected as Trudeau. That's one thing. The other thing is, why do you call them unreliable? I don't remember Russia breaking some, how do you call them, contracts. I remember the free world imposing sanctions. So who's unreliable? And then after sanctions were imposed, that means the rules were changed, then Russia reacted. So I don't know what this guy is talking about. Do you? Who's unreliable? If I make a deal with you and you in the middle of the deal or whenever, after 2 years you change things because, I don't know, you don't like me anymore, who's unreliable? Well, that's the first point here. Then he's very concerned that about the carbon emission and human rights. And he's talking about China. Now, just so I'm honest with you from the very beginning, I think, that's my assessment, and I think I should be free to express it. I think that all this climate change with carbon emissions is just a way to get some businesses in power that would later control us more. That's what I feel. I don't know if it's so or not, but I'm afraid of that scenario. That's one thing. The other one, I think that they create new industries that would be subservient to the guys who implement them. So you have the politicians who create this carbon emission and taxes and all that, and the companies that will get ahead, you know what I mean? They will be the ones that later, after they enrich themselves or get ahead of everybody else, will be the ones that will financially support these individuals for re-elections. That means campaign donations, if you know, that's how it's called. Here in the free world, it's campaign donation. In the neighborhood, that would be called bribery. But here, that's campaign donation. So I don't like at all this idea with carbon emission, the control that these governments try to impose on us for the good of fighting climate change and blah, blah, blah. So that's where I stand. And it says here that this guy, Trudeau, says what we've focused on now is very much ensuring that our economies, and now is his little words that he always uses, our open, free economies don't rely on authoritarian leaders like Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, let's see. Is your economy open and free? Is it? I know that when your industries that cannot compete with other countries' industries, then you impose sanctions. So how come that's open? And your economy, I don't think, is really open, because there's a lot of protectionism occurring in your economies. And then I know that's not open since you give perks to certain kind of groups just because those groups are certain kind of groups. That's not open and free. That's, giving a certain kind of groups, certain kind of individuals an extra boost for the goal of equity. So how can you do this? Well, very simple. With half of mouth say something, with the other mouth say something else. And it says here that obviously he talks about China, and this is what he says. Protectionism against Canadian investors or Canadian companies actually end up hurting US companies and United States workers in significant ways, Trudeau said when asked if he was concerned about protectionist trade policies again being an issue in the 2024 US elections. So how come it's open and free when you have protectionist policies? Again. And now he's going to tell us about how the free world doesn't like to interfere in anybody else's internal affairs. But they don't like when other countries get involved in theirs, but because they don't interfere in anybody else. And this is what Trudeau says, okay? Trudeau also said he stands with protesters in China. Now put this in context, or in contrast, with the truck drivers, remember the convoy? They were protesting, right? So remember what he said about those in Canada against his little weasel rule versus what he says about Chinese protesters. Trudeau also said he stands with protesters in China who are demonstrating against the world's toughest COVID-19 restrictions after reports of blah 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 blah. So he stands with the protesters in China, but not in Canada. And I'm quoting, "We of course stand with those protesters." How about the Canadian protesters? He said, though that is a fringe minority with unacceptable views. He dictates what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I will tell you a little bit how this guy will be treated in my neighborhood if he would just start talking like that. So he says that we of course stand with those protesters, Trudeau said. The Canadian leader, he's a leader. No, he's a representative of someone else's desires and wishes. He's not a leader. He's not leading. Okay? He's making sure that someone else's wishes are there and they are promoted. He's not a leader. He's actually an executor. He's just an employee. He executes what we, the voters, want that person to do it. He's like a messenger. That's what he is. But the mass media creates this illusion they are our leaders. No, they're not our leaders. They're our employees, our public servant. Servant is not a leader, is it? I mean, not by my dictionary. So the Canadian leader said his government, he doesn't fucking have a government. That's a Canadian government, the people's government. That he is part of it because he was giving the mandate by the freaking citizens of Canada, or subjects. I don't know what these guys identify as. So the Canadian leader said his government was watching very closely the protests unfolding in China. And I'm quoting, "It's really important that citizens be able to make themselves heard," he said. Did you hear that? Is this what he said about those Canadian citizens in Canada protesting his bullshit with COVID? Did he say that it is important that citizens be able to make themselves heard? Or he immediately invoked emergency powers like a tyrant. I don't know. What do you think? Now I'm going to tell you this. When I came from a communist country at one point, Romania, and we heard about Canada, United States, Germany, France, the Western world, we were fed this narrative that over there is beautiful and law is law and democracy and all that. I'm just angry because when I got here, I realized it's a farce. It's better there than where I come from. That's for sure. That's for sure. But when I'm angry is that it's like, okay, you're gonna buy a Porsche. And the Porsche, I don't know, has 8 cylinders or 12 cylinders and whatever. And they tell you the Porsche goes from, I don't know, from 0 kilometers per hour to 100 kilometers per hour, let's say in 3.5 seconds. And you pay a lot of money, you sacrifice to buy the Porsche. So you come here with sacrifice, leave everything and all that. You come over here. And when you come over here and you try the Porsche gets to 100 kilometers per hour not in 3.5 seconds or 3 point whatever. It goes in 7.9. Now how would you feel about it? That's how I feel about it. That's how I feel, and that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying all these things. It's not, oh my God, you keep criticizing. Yes, because I think I've been lied. And I think what's going on here, it's a big lie. It's a big lie. And unfortunately, these people here, the natives, most of them are not seeing it. And therefore, they're participating in this big lie through their ignorance. Right? And now let me tell you about Trudeau. If this guy would have been my age or older 1 year, maybe 2 years older, and I was in school with this guy, he would have got smacked. He would not play he would not play any sports anyway. He probably would be with the girls. This kind of person would be probably a feminized, pussified guy with the girls. So whatever, staying with the girls, talking with the girls, and we are doing boy stuff, man stuff. But if he would be like a half something, how I can't remember how you pronounce that. In ancient China, there were those eunuchs, the ones without balls that they cannot impregnate the queen and whatever, the courtesans, the court lady, the ladies in the emperor's court, the male ones. I can't remember how you call them. We call them eunuchs with E, eunuchs. So he would have been treated like one of those. He would be the girls, playing girls thing, and we were just, fuck you. And if he would be around, we would make jokes, rude jokes, very rude jokes on this guy. And he would stay around away from us boys. Why? Because we knew what he was. But then, I had one example in my childhood. One of this got very well, like Trudeau. He's a leader. He's a leader, can you believe? So it seems like that those kinds of qualities, well, his father created a little, headway for him. But I'm just saying, that guy, like Trudeau, I see other people that I knew, they were like, as I said, and they ended up very well as leaders. How is that possible? I don't want to think that that's the ideal whatsoever, because you can see how a weasel is a weasel from whatever I said about Trudeau right here. Whatever he said about China, put in a context with the truckers' convoy in Ottawa. That's one thing. He talks about free and open economy. That's BS, right? You know that there are certain kind of businesses here, like for instance the banks and other businesses that are too big to fall. What is he talking about? He talks about Russia cannot be reliable. Really, I think this Ukraine war proved once again that the West cannot be reliable. Because if you don't do what the West tells you, then they will try to destroy you. They will not try to compete. Look what they do with the Russian oil. And not only with oil. They don't allow Russian energy to compete with American energy. Why? Or any other products. Because they're going to lose, because it costs too much. So this is the open, free economies. And then they are very much for the Chinese protesters, but not at all for protesters against him. No character. No character. People of no character. But there are our leaders, as Reuters tries to instill that in us. And there are weasels over there, weasels, who read that article and don't even take offense with the fact that that guy was called a leader. He's a representative. He's a public servant. He's an employee of ours. When we are going to understand that, then we understand that he's not ruling over us. Okay? He should be fired whenever we feel like, when he's crossing the line as he does all the time. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.